Mr. Speaker, this session saw this government make the biggest attack on teachers in the country's history. We started in the fall with the government stripping away of the human rights of teachers, taking away their rights to bargain a fair agreement for the work they do in our schools to educate Alberta's next generation. And they did it all in one day. It was unprecedented. So, to the education minister, was using the notwithstanding clause against teachers worth it?
Great question.
When the Notwithstanding clause was written into Canada's charter, it was meant to be a constitutional pressure valve, something governments might use sparingly, under extreme circumstances. What's happening in Alberta right now challenges that original intent.
Our government is introducing Bill 9, the Protecting Alberta's Children Statutes Amendment Act. Bill 9 will invoke the Canadian Charter's Notwithstanding Clause and to amend and uphold three critical pieces of legislation without further court delay or uncertainty.
In just 2 months, Premier Danielle Smith's government used the Notwithstanding clause 4 separate times, not 4 times in a decade, not once per mandate, 4 times in a single legislative window. The first instance came during Alberta's province-wide teacher strike. Rather than allowing negotiations or the courts to weigh in on labor rights, the government passed back-to-work legislation and preemptively used the Notwithstanding clause. That decision removed the possibility of a charter challenge altogether.
This is one of the most consequential actions our government will take during our time in office. The Notwithstanding Clause is part of Canada's system of parliamentary democracy. It exists to balance the power of the courts and the authority of democratically elected governments. By invoking it, we're keeping these decisions in the hands of those who are directly accountable to Albertans and ensuring these protections can move forward without further court delay or uncertainty.
Overriding freedom of association and forcing educators back into classrooms under imposed terms. Then came the next 3 uses, all tied to one policy area, gender and education laws. The government invoked the clause to shield legislation restricting gender-affirming healthcare for minors. It then applied it again to laws requiring parental consent for name and pronoun changes in schools. And finally, it used the clause to protect legislation banning transgender girls from competing in female sports categories. Each of these laws faced or was expected to face constitutional scrutiny. Instead of letting courts assess whether charter rights were violated, the government cut the process off entirely. What makes this moment different isn't just what the laws do. It's how routinely the override is now being deployed. The Notwithstanding clause is no longer a last resort. It's becoming a first line of defense. And once a constitutional safeguard becomes a habit, the question isn't about ideology anymore. It's about precedent. Because every future government now knows how easy it is to bypass judicial oversight.
The Alberta government is using Section 33 of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, the Notwithstanding Clause, to opt out of a court ruling that struck down Alberta's laws to protect children and teenagers from the harms of transgender ideology. In 2024, Alberta passed laws to prohibit giving testosterone to girls and estrogen to boys, gender reassignment surgery to minors under the age of 18, and also requiring that parents be kept in the loop as to what is happening with their own children at school. Alberta's laws are very much in line with what's going on all over the world. Many countries are backing away from this transgender ideology, and they are recognizing the fact that has been known for a long time that the vast majority of gender-confused children, by the time they're 18 years old, accept their biological sex. And there is no persuasive evidence that it's actually helpful to get kids on an irreversible, what often ends up being an irreversible pathway where they are taking puberty blockers, opposite sex hormones, and then getting surgeries. The world is moving away from that. Alberta's in line with the world. However, the LGBT group Egal Canada challenged Alberta's law in court and argued that children have a constitutional right to get these kinds of medical treatments. I'm not aware of Egal Canada arguing that we should strike down the laws that currently prohibit minors from voting, from joining the military, from smoking cigarettes, from consuming alcohol, from having sex with an adult. There's all kinds of restrictions on children, rightly so. Why? Because they are children.
The real impact of Alberta's recent use of the Notwithstanding clause may not be felt today or even this year. Its consequences lie further down the road in how governance itself begins to change. Each time a government overrides charter protections, it sends a signal about how conflicts will be resolved in the future. Not through legal interpretation, not through judicial balancing, but through political authority alone. In Alberta, the clause was attached to legislation ending a teacher strike, and later to laws governing healthcare decisions, school policies, and athletic participation for transgender youth. Those policies now operate in a legal space where charter challenges are off the table, not temporarily delayed, but deliberately excluded. The question now is what happens next? Will future labor disputes be handled the same way?
We are here in Ottawa. The federal government here has expressed very vehement opposition as well to what's happening and said they're looking at a broad range of options. The Premier had left open the door to invoking the Notwithstanding clause in order to get this kind of stuff passed. If the form of it that takes legislation, she wouldn't be the first Premier to do that. Saskatchewan's Premier did the same on gender identity policy back in the fall, I believe. Do you think the federal government needs to look at a way of dealing with that?
Well, I think I certainly would. I mean, let me start with the fact that I'm very troubled by the recent frequency with which conservative governments across this country are invoking the Notwithstanding clause in order to avoid providing and securing the charter rights and freedoms that their citizens otherwise deserve. It seems to me that conservatives, and particularly extremist right-wing conservatives, don't care about our Charter of Rights and Freedoms, don't care about the human rights of Canadians.
Will other controversial files, policing, protests, healthcare access, education curriculum, also be preemptively shielded from review? And if so, how will Albertans know whether laws are proportionate, fair, or even necessary? Another unanswered question is how this affects institutional behavior. If courts are increasingly sidelined, do governments become less careful in drafting legislation? Does the incentive to consult experts, stakeholders, and rights groups diminish when legal accountability is no longer guaranteed? There is also the issue of political inheritance. This tool doesn't disappear when one premier leaves office. The same mechanism can be used by any future government of any ideology against any group. Supporters may trust today's leadership. The governance systems are built for uncertainty, not trust. They exist to restrain power when public opinion shifts or political pressure rises. So the deeper concern isn't what the Notwithstanding clause was used for this time. It's whether Albertans are being conditioned to accept its routine use, and whether 5 years from now, anyone will even question it. Because once the extraordinary feels normal, reversing course becomes far more difficult.
When Alberta's New Democrats become the government of Alberta, inshallah, God willing, as I always say, we will never, ever use the Notwithstanding clause. And one of our first acts as government will be to introduce legislation restricting the use of that clause for all future Alberta governments. Because we believe in human rights for everyone. We believe in freedom for everyone, not just when it's convenient.
Supporters of Premier Danielle Smith argue that these decisions are democratic. After all, the government was elected. But democracy in Canada has never just been about elections. It's about limits on power. That's where the notwithstanding clause becomes controversial. In Alberta, the clause was first used to end a teacher strike through back-to-work legislation. The message was clear. When negotiations stall, the government will decide, and courts won't be allowed to intervene. Then, in rapid succession, the same tool was applied 3 more times to laws affecting transgender youth and students. Restrictions on healthcare, rules around names and pronouns in schools, limits on sports participation. In each case, the government chose to bypass judicial review rather than defend the laws under the Charter. This raises a deeper question. Is democracy simply about the will of the majority, or is it also about protecting individuals from that majority? Canada's constitutional system was designed to balance both. Legislatures make laws, courts test those laws against fundamental rights. The notwithstanding clause exists, but as an exception, not a governing philosophy. Using it 4 times in 2 months suggests a shift in how power is understood. Courts are no longer partners in governance. They're obstacles to be overridden. That doesn't automatically make Alberta a dictatorship, but it does move decision-making away from independent institutions and closer to centralized executive authority. And history shows that when governments get used to ruling without limits, they rarely stop on their own. The real issue isn't today's laws, it's tomorrow's possibilities.